Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Giselle World. Flutist and vocalist, Giselle is a captivating performing artist, infusing ritual and indigenous culture into the electronic scene. She's a classically trained musician that has been journeying in the electronic music scene for over 10 years. Through her travels and love of ceremony, she's created a soundscape of unique, conscious textures and infusion of tribal electronic medicine music while curating an alchemic experience, honoring the elements and inspiring healing through the powerful use of indigenous chants and ancient mantras. She has been extensively in service to plant medicines and an advocate for indigenous rights, as well as sharing about indigenous wisdom and culture all over the world using music as the main tool by teaching about the cultures through workshops and song circles. Giselle, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know you were born in Miami from Nicaraguan and European parents. You received your master's degree in musical performance in New York. So you spent your formative years in the fast-pacing, money-grabbing, asset-obsessed Western world. How did you find the traditional indigenous music?
Well, I found it in Miami actually. After I had finished school, I had left to study in New York for some years, and then I stayed when I finished my graduate studies. I stayed in New York to work and to live and experience the lifestyle there in the city. It was quite crazy, a very different time. I see that as a past life of mine, especially since I had just started to get involved in the nightlife scene. So it was after the crash, the economic crash of around 2008, that many of us were impacted, and my lifestyle in New York was impacted. So I came back to Miami to take a break and figure out what I was going to do, if I would go back, what was the next move. And when I returned to Miami, I I ended up meeting some new people that were working with plant medicine, and they had invited me to come to a ceremony. I had never heard of plant medicine before this moment. This was around 2009, 2010. And I decided that at that time it felt like I was searching for something. I needed something different. And this sounded like something that would be really helpful for my life. And when I went to my first ceremony, it was a whole new world for me. I never experienced before. I realized that I had been quite disconnected from myself and from nature, and I didn't even realize it. I thought that I had a connection, but that night I realized that I really didn't, because I was actually feeling it for the first time. And it didn't land fully the first ceremony. The first ceremony after, I did feel a huge shift in myself and my energy. My I've never been an early bird, I'll admit. I always somehow activate late at night, and so waking up very early full of energy is difficult for me. And after the first ceremony, which was with a medicine called peyote, the days following, I just felt amazing. I was up every day very early, full of energy, ready to go. Things I had procrastinated on for months suddenly were completed in 1 week. I understood how to do it all, and I had the impulse and the energy and the clarity. So at that point, I was like, wow, okay, this is something. There's something here. And I didn't rush back immediately. I needed time to integrate that first experience. And then when it came around the second time, that's when it truly landed for me. And I said, wow, okay, I'm here for this. I want to do this. And what really happened for me in that second ceremony was that my relationship with music had a revival. I consider myself to have always been very much connected to music. I've been doing it since I'm 4 years old, and I've always loved music. However, sometimes I think, and maybe you could relate or your listeners could relate, we get used to, we love something or we love someone and we kind of take it for granted. We know we love them,
Yes.
so it's not a big deal. It's just like,
Yeah.
but what happened to me that second ceremony was that I somehow fell in love all over again with music in a way that moved me to tears. And I hadn't felt that. I couldn't even remember the last time that I had felt that. And so I started to attend more ceremonies and start a very profound journey back into myself and things that were connecting me to my ancestors and even past life. And I realized that I was meant to be there. I had been doing this already for lifetimes, and I have many ancestors who have worked in these ways. So it was like a remembrance. And as I started
Yes.
to remember that I needed to be here, it started to really shift the way that I proceeded in my career and in music. So I still continued with electronic music, but the intention shifted and my tolerance for certain type of environment also shifted, and little by little led me to where I am now. I didn't share the kind of music that I share now that's considered like sacred medicine music. I didn't share this publicly before. I sat in ceremonies for many years where I only offered this type of music in that container because it felt like that was the only place that it was appropriate to do so.
Yes.
And little by little, I started to have different people requesting me to share it outside publicly. And I honestly didn't know if that was okay. I didn't know if that would be disrespectful or
Yeah.
inappropriate. And I asked many of my teachers that I was working with and sitting in ceremonies with, and my elders, I asked them what they thought, and all of them said yes, go, we need this. And they considered me a bridge. So as soon as I made the shift from this classical fusion of electronic music into the medicine music, all of that is a fusion, it just became more about this. um, Things took off,
Yeah.
things changed, and I think it's because I finally found something that felt truly authentic for me. And I feel that, people feel that when it's something that's very, very personal and real. It wasn't part of any package that was already existing, and so it moved people, and the music started to move, and then I started to move around as well. And so that's how, Giselle World came from me being around the world sharing this type of prayer music, but in the context that appeals to a larger group of people
Yeah.
while still being quite niche. Yeah.
Yes, I listened to some of your tracks, and indeed they are very touchy, very, very beautiful and moving. And in other discussions with my other guests, we pointed to this desire of the elders of any culture, either is in South America or North America, this willingness of sharing their knowledge with the Western world, because this is a critical point where we really have to take all this in and realize who we are and that we are all connected. And you are also underlining the same idea that they are willing to share.
Yes.
Was your second ceremony with peyote as well, or a different plant
It
medicine?
was. It was my second ceremony was with peyote. I worked with peyote for a while before I started to sit with ayahuasca. I had already begun to hear about ayahuasca as early as my first ceremony. Of course, it's like once you go there into this world, then the conversations come up of different plants.
Yes.
I admit I was afraid of ayahuasca. From what I heard, I was not sure when I would feel brave enough. I think it took me almost a year of already sitting in many ceremonies with peyote before I felt brave enough to take on the journey of ayahuasca and her teachings and her healings. And when I finally did, it was definitely life-changing. I mean, peyote was extremely life-changing for me and continues to be. But ayahuasca it's just a different type of way that it works that feels, for me, a bit stronger. Not necessarily better, but the experience as a whole is a lot stronger. So it keeps me on my toes, even now, even though I work with this medicine a lot now in service to it. So not just taking for myself, but serving others. I always go into every ceremony with a lot of respect and humility because I understand that she's very powerful, and I continue to work with peyote as well. With peyote, it's different for me. It really feels like I've been working with peyote for lifetimes, and it's part of my lineage. So it sits in me easier.
Yeah, peyote is something I haven't tried, but I compare ayahuasca with a slap in your face. It's that powerful and that sometimes brutal, but you really have to be prepared for that type of interaction and surrendering. Otherwise, it's not pretty,
Mm.
indeed. How much time do you spend in the jungle with the tribes and with your with people who do retreats?
I try to spend some time every year, if possible. Some years have been a bit more difficult than others, mostly because I'm touring so much, which is great when that's happening. I do find it really important that I have time, that I craft time. Now I'm seeing it differently. I have to intentionally craft the time to do that work because it's crucial to what I'm putting out into the world. And so I was saying that for me it's important to be sure I'm crafting the time to do my work, my personal studies, so that I'm walking in integrity, sharing this work and my music from a place of respect from where it comes from. So I actually just came back from a master plant diet, dieta they call it, in Peru. I was there from the end of November to mid December. So I just came back home about a week and a half ago. And it was a very, very beautiful, profound experience with one of my teachers there in Peru in his retreat center. So you go into the jungle for a minimum of a week or so, and you have a hut. You go in by yourself in silence. It's isolation, and they assign you a master plant that you work with. So you're drinking this plant every single day, kind of like a tea, a big bottle like this. You have about 3 servings. The plants in itself, they're not psychedelic, but they're very strong in a very subtle way. So they work a lot. For me, the plant I was working with is called Bobinsana.
Mm-hmm.
So she works a lot through the dream realms. So she would make me sleep a lot because during the sleep in the dreams, I would receive the messages. She's also known for opening creativity and sharing songs, the sacred songs that they call Icaros. I was doing this work, and you have a very specific meal plan, a food diet that you abide to so that you're not consuming anything that will clash with the work of the plants. And I did this for about 10 days. It was very beautiful, very peaceful. And in between, you also have every other night an ayahuasca ceremony. So the ayahuasca is working with the plant and integrating it. I already started to feel the shifts. And then when we finish, there's a 30-day post diet. I actually didn't know this until I was already there. So I was like, oh, wow. For the holidays, I was on a very strict diet. So I couldn't enjoy the holiday food. And there's some restrictions also energetically. So we're not even allowed to touch people or hug them while we're in the post diet. We're meant to take distance. So it kind of continued in the theme of the year of isolation and quarantine and distance. But at the end, I'm almost at the end of my post diet. I finish on the 2nd of January. I'm definitely counting the days.
Yes, I'm thinking
Where I
of taking
can
something similar next year, if possible, at Casa Galactica in Peru. They have a similar dieta program with a 4 weeks detox and alternating ayahuasca sessions. And if the travel will allow me, I will considering going there.
I highly recommend it. It's a very, very special, beautiful experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched your video Rezo, where you are by a waterfall performing a ceremony. So setting aside the thought that the scene was filmed for the video, what is the significance of such ceremony? If you can share with us, please.
That song, Rezo, it means prayer in Spanish. And I wrote that when I was creating my album, my first full album, Tribu. This album is a prayer. It's a prayer with the elements, the plant medicines, and all the tribes. That's why it's called Tribu. It was inspired by an Icaro that my teacher, Herbert Quinteros, he's the person I just went to do my dieta with. He shared this Icaro with me, and it's a calling of all the tribes. And so this prayer is continuing through each track of this particular album. So what I'm doing there in the video, and I'm doing it, it's actually amazing. That video came together just by chance. I had just returned to Bali, and I was doing a yoga teacher training, and I met this very sweet young woman who was also doing the training with me, and she does photography and video. After the training finished, she was one of the few that stayed. Many people went back home, and I was also still gonna stay in Bali to relax a bit and visit some sites. And so I asked her if she wanted to go see some waterfalls and take some pictures. I didn't actually know how amazing of a photographer or videographer she was. I just
Mhm.
remembered that she said she liked taking pictures, so I said, let's go on an early morning adventure. And then she was very excited because she knew of my work, and she was like, yes, let me take some photos and videos. I have some good gear we can take, so bring some outfits. And I said, okay. And then I arrived there, and it was very early. It was almost 5, about 5 and before 6 a.m.,
Mhm.
so that we could find the waterfall empty. And I began to set up for a ceremony to say thank you to all the spirits and ancestors of this land of Bali and the water. And she started to film it. And then we got creative, and it became this video. I had no idea I was going to have such a beautiful video, but it was truly capturing an authentic prayer of gratitude to the elements of that particular space in Bali, which is a very, very dear place to my heart.
Yes,
So
it's a
that's how
beautiful
that
place. Yes.
happened. Mm.
Why did you choose the flute as an instrument?
I chose the flute because since I was a child, before I even knew what the flute looked like, I knew what it sounded like, and I loved it. My family is quite musical. Not everyone decided to go into music as a profession, but we have a lot of musicians in my family, and my father and my mother were both very passionate about music. And my grandfather on my father's side, whom I didn't have the opportunity to meet because he died when I was very little, he used to love classical music, and he had my father study piano, and my father was not very good at it, but he maintained the love for it. So when I was very little, my older brother, who was only older by about a year and 9 months, he started studying piano, and then he got into the violin. And he and I both have maintained music as our profession. My older brother is now a conductor of opera,
Wow.
and we studied together most of our conservatory studies, we did it together, except for when I went to New York. We were in different programs at that time, but we played in orchestra together most of our lives. So I grew up just with my brother because he already had this very natural inclination towards music. It was inspired for sure by my father, my parents, but he had very natural talent, as did I. That was shown at a very young age. We both had a natural inclination, but I started singing first. I started singing when I was, as soon as I could speak, I was already exploring singing as a very, very small child, like 4 years old. And I was surrounded by music. So since my father loved music, he would play classical music a lot in the house. And I would hear the flute and it would just make me light up. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know exactly what it was. I just knew when I would hear it, that sound, I want to play that. So as soon as I could, which was about the age of 10, in school, they have music and you can choose it as an elective and you can choose an instrument. I knew right away that I wanted to play the flute. And when I first saw the flute, this is a story that my father likes to share and my first teacher likes to share because he said that he had never seen anything like it. I went to the room where all the instruments were, and he said the flutes are there. He brought the flute out, he opened the case, and I grabbed it and I assembled it all at once as if I had already been playing it my whole life. And normally he has to teach someone how to do that, how to put it together, because they don't know. And you know, you're also a kid technically. So he said that he was like, okay, that's definitely your instrument. And I got quite good at the flute quickly. Within a year, I was playing very well, and I really couldn't have known the difference. I didn't know that I was doing better than most until now. Now that I've been a teacher for many years, I can see that there was something there. So the flute and I have a very deep, deep connection and love. I still love the sound of the flute the same way. When I hear a flute, it still excites me. I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, in fact, I listened to a beautiful flute sound last night with Chris August. They did the Sonic Breathwork session, and they released one of their CDs, and it has flute embedded as a musical instrument. That was beautiful. And in fact, flute is pretty much, I think, a traditional instrument in the South American culture, especially for Peru. They play the Icaros with using the flute as well. So of course, there's a connection there.
Yes, the in a lot of North American native music as well, they have those native flutes. I've learned to play some of them as well and enjoy very much. And in Peru and the Andes, they have the pan flutes that are played like
Yes,
this.
yeah.
Very, very beautiful. Just you feel the spirit of the wind for sure in those instruments.
Yeah. So we all know about the the benefits of music on our human body, like the healing benefits. Did you try to investigate if your music has even more potential than regular music because it has the traditional influences and the electronic ones put together? Is that, infusion, you are so let's say proud of it? Have you tried to investigate a little bit deeper?
Yes, I have. I have, and actually, I've considered. So when I finished my master's, my original plan and the plan my parents had as well for me, for my siblings, my older brother and I, there was a plan of like how we were going to go through our education. And so the plan was that I was going to continue onto my doctorate, and I would have a doctorate by the age of 28. That was the goal. And it was definitely attainable because I went through my schooling very quickly. I placed out of a lot of programs, so I had graduated from my master's by the time I was about 24. So I could have done my doctorate and finished by the time I was 27. However, all of that advanced work that I did left me burnt out, and I had no desire to go into a doctorate program, and I didn't know what I would do it in because I didn't feel at that point, so I felt like this is maturity and wisdom coming through, that I needed to go and put myself through that to receive a paper that wasn't really worth anything for me. I didn't know what I would do with it. Okay, I have a doctorate. What am I going to do now? A doctorate in performance. How is that going to help me? I felt like at the end of the day, if I'm a good player, I'm a good player. I don't need a paper. No one's going to care about a paper at the end of the day. They're going to care about what you sound like.
Yes.
So I didn't have a grounded purpose to pursue the doctorate at the time. As the years have gone on and I've gotten deep into this work of plant medicine and medicine music and sound healing and all of this, honestly, so much of it is very intuitive for me. I understand it at a deep intuitive level that doesn't require me to have a book tell me what's happening. But I started to get inspired to learn more so that I could share it with others and maybe write a book someday about it. So here's where now I'm revisiting the topic of a doctoral program. So I'm considering to do the doctorate in, it's called music therapy.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So I didn't know before what I would do a doctorate in. Now it makes sense. Because if I go back to school to do a doctorate in music therapy, I can write a dissertation that will actually be about sound healing, but in the realm of indigenous chants, this type of music and vibration, because I live it and see it all the time. Every ceremony that I'm sitting in, offering my Icaros, I can feel, especially with the medicine, and since you've had, medicine before, ayahuasca, you know how sensitive the frequencies are around any little sound in that space moves something.
Yeah.
So I feel it, and I'm working with very specific chants to generate a certain type of feeling, and also to guide a journey with the plants, whether it's to help them have more visions, or if activate the medicine, so that means it can intensify the experience, and when it's gotten to a certain point, there are icaros you sing to bring it down and balance it, and then there are other icaros that you bring to help start cooling it off. So I'm able to experience this through the work I've done intuitively, but also what my teachers tell me, how they've shown me over the time. I would love to be able to write a dissertation, study it deeper on maybe a more scientific level, to help understand for myself, and also to share how this works, what's actually happening with the frequencies. Because there are a lot of people who have already written about sound healing and the different tones and frequencies. If we're talking about Tibetan music, for example, and the bowls and crystal bowls, and even chimes and different instruments of this type of work, more from the Far East. Yes. I haven't yet seen anyone really write anything on the music in South America or Mexico on this level, or this type of frequency, and what it's doing to people, how they receive it, because it's definitely doing something. So I've already begun studying a bit, but I would like to study more, to share more, and see how this can benefit. That's the maybe 5-year plan.
Yeah, I mean, there are books out there, and the research done by even Dr. Joe Dispenza, who looks at brain activity during breath work, specific breath work. So you might want to try a similar model where you monitor the brain of that particular person or a group of people, and see how their vitals react to the music, and the brain reacts to the music, and what type of regions in the brain will light up. So that indeed will be a very comprehensive study, and backed by scientific data, which would be great.
Right.
Do you consider yourself a curandero now?
Yes and no. I always tread carefully. I actually sometimes I do different talks, and I've had interviews about labels and terminology. I appreciate the fact that you use the word curandera versus shaman, because I personally, I'm not very into labels. I don't like to be labeled anything. It's too easy, and also people get attached too much to what a label means for them, and then also begins the placing people on a pedestal that often strips them of their humanity. So I work with plants, I work with sound, I work with music, I work deeply in ceremony, and more, I won't even say every year, every month I feel like it's getting deeper and the call is stronger. More people are requesting my presence in this work, and they are finding support. That I'm healing them, no. So when I think of like what is a curandera is someone, or a curandero is someone who works with plants. Generally they're considered kind of like a doctor of the jungle or of the desert, because when we speak of peyote, it
Yeah.
comes from the desert. So these are people who are working with the plants to help heal others. So they're administering the medicine to them with that intention. So it's not just a physical healing that's happening, it could be spiritual. And they also do different works like rituals that they call limpias, things like this, to help clear their energetic field, and how that impacts all the different aspects of our existence, from the emotional body to the physical body and the mental body.
Yeah.
So most of the people that I have seen that I consider to be curanderos, like healers in that way, they're a lot older and they work with many different plants. I am still learning. I'm still learning to work with this. I do work with the plants and I do my best to help people out, and I have learned how to do limpias, but that I'm gonna take on like patients to come and receive, curación with me, I would sooner recommend one of my elders before I would step into that. I'm happy to be there in support, and if they find something beneficial and healing for them through what I do when I'm there, which many people do, then wonderful. But I try not to go down that road of calling myself a curandera. I've just recently started to accept being called a medicine woman, because I am a woman and I am working with medicine deeply, and I have dedicated myself to this. And then, as far as the word shaman, which people throw around a lot, this word for me can be very problematic, because, first of all, shamanism comes from Siberia, more Russia, Turkey,
Yeah.
this region. In the world that I'm in of plant medicines and South America and Mexico, they actually don't have this word. They don't even have it in their culture. They don't call themselves shamans. They use other terms and it means something different. And so the way that I understand the word shaman is not only that it's coming from this place of Siberia and all of this, but it's also a type of work that's much more closely related to what some people can consider like wizard. Why I say that? Because you're working with the metaphysical world, with the outer world and the inner world, and there is a form of manipulation that's happening between one human to the next. So, i.e., the person that you call the shaman and the people who are receiving, whether it's with plant medicine or without, they are doing something that affects how they feel, how they interact. And so in some cultures they can even consider that like witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. There's a lot of witchcrafting that can be good, can be helpful. Nonetheless, the point is that there's a manipulation that's happening. And so I think that when someone starts to take on this title, especially in modern times and what we call neo-shamanism and in Western culture, in my opinion, so take it or leave it, I
Yeah.
think there's too much ego
Yes.
because it's a power trip is the way that I perceive it. It feels like a power trip of like I'm a shaman, and so therefore what that entails is like that manipulation of energy. I have power over you or someone else. So this for me is not anything I want to be associated with, because I'm in service to the plants and the work that they are doing on people, and I'm supporting that work, but I'm not healing them. The plants are the teachers, the plants are the masters, they're the ones doing the work, and I'm just helping facilitate it and create a safe environment for the people who attend. And whatever they need that I can do, I'm there for, but I don't pretend to be the healer or manipulate anyone's experience, only to assist in guiding it with the most beauty possible. This is definitely my goal, to make it as beautiful as possible, because no matter what, these plants, they're very strong and they can be very, very intense in a way that feels difficult. So if I can do anything to help steer it in a way that feels less difficult, then that's the goal. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that would fall into being a curandera, but yeah, that
It's
was a long-winded explanation to
yeah.
say,
It's
yeah.
a humbling point of view, which I like very much. Thank you.
Mm.
Tribal Waters is the name of one of your albums and was inspired by your trip to Scorpios Mykonos in Greece. I really enjoyed the experience, the brief explanation you gave on a different interview. Would you be able to go a little bit deeper on how you felt there?
Yes, well, before I arrived to Scorpios in Mykonos, I had already begun in my ceremonies to work deeply with the element of water. There was one ceremony I was participating in many, many years ago, and it was a water prayer ceremony. And that ceremony for me was one of my strongest peyote ceremonies ever. It had me on the ground, like forehead in the earth, purging, crying, and I received a very strong message that night when I was in it, that it's funny, the medicine sometimes can be very crude in the way it expresses itself. But because I was in kind of a suffering place, I was in my own world, a little bit of a victim,
Mhm.
as I was with my head in the ground, and I was praying for myself. And the medicine came and was like, focus. We're here for the water. We're praying for the water. So pay attention and sit up. And it made me like sit up and realize, wow, the water. And so I started to receive all these messages about the importance of the water and what we have to do to take care of it, because there's so much that's happening around the world with the water, in the oceans, in the rivers, and I needed to be part of the healing of the water and using my voice to advocate for the protection of the water and reminding people of the water inside of us and how crucial it is for us to also take care of the water inside, because it's all a reflection, what's happening in the water out there, what's happening in the water
Yes.
internally. So I still wasn't doing tribal waters or performing in this way at that time, but it impacted me, and I started to do um, almost bi-weekly beach cleanups after that.
Mhm.
I had already participated in beach cleanups before since I was a teenager, probably, but now I started to organize them and invite people to come to clean up the beach. And then every time we had these beach cleanups, we would share about the water and the importance of it, and started connecting with different organizations that work with water. And so I just got very inspired by this work and focusing here. And in ceremonies, there's a moment in the peyote ceremony specifically, and some ayahuasca ceremonies. But in the peyote ceremony, there are two main prayers that happen throughout the night that are for the water. One of them is called the midnight water, and then there's the morning water. So after the midnight water, which is the first time that water enters the ceremony as a medicine, and it's considered the highest medicine and the most sacred moment in the ceremony, that's the point where you're meant to sing water songs. So until the water comes in, you don't sing any song that mentions the water. We wait until the water comes in, and then we sing the water songs. And I just connected so deeply with these songs that I started to dedicate myself to learning many water songs, and then I started to write water songs. So this is still my main. I live for the water songs. They're to me the most beautiful, whether it's for the ocean or the river or waterfalls. I sing a lot of water songs. So I wanted to dedicate one of my offerings, my electronic shows, and even ones that are not electronic, to the water. So what I do is I build an altar around the water as the center point, and in each of my tribal water offerings, I speak a little bit about water. So whoever is there listening, they receive something that, even if it's subtle, makes an impact, that they think about the water that they're drinking that night and every day after. And oh yes, that's true, we have to take care of the water. And then creating these songs that are for the water, but presenting them in a way that feels easy for them to understand and digest. And Tribal Waters has taken me to the most beautiful places around the world next to the water, because it's become a ritual that many people feel connected to. They love, it's beautiful, and so they want, like Scorpios is located in one of the most beautiful places in Mykonos, which is already one of the most gorgeous islands in the world. But where it's located is on the edge of this kind of rocky space where the sun sets, and it's quite epic sunset into the water. And this is where I was doing the ritual. So I would do it always at sunset. So people show up for the sunset, and then we're singing, we're praying to the water, we're singing to the water. And I invite the ones who are present to it to really be part of the ritual. And then we sing, people dance, and then every time I finish, I take the water from the altar and I take it back to the ocean, and I offer it back so that the prayers that were infused into that water connect to the waters of the world through the ocean. So that's, and that has become something that surprisingly many people feel connected to in these unexpected places like Scorpios, which is a party place, really. But the owners, they love it. They love that they feel like they're getting something sacred in their space. And many other places around the world that are similar to beach clubs or resorts, they have that connection. More and more people, I find, are starting to go down this route that they call holistic approach, or spiritual.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's easy because it's water. Everyone drinks water. It's a medicine that's very sacred, but it's easy to digest. It's not peyote or ayahuasca, which might feel too far out there. Water is everywhere, so everyone can vouch for water.
Yeah, I have a connection with water as well. I write about water. I wrote 2 books about water. And in fact, a project which I was thinking about is Love Letters to Water, an anthology of stories or fiction or non-fiction. And I'll put your name on the list just in case that project will move forward, because it will be a pleasure to have you there.
I love that. Love Letters to Water. I can't wait to read it.
I know you are involved in a lot of charitable activities. What are the main ones you are still doing it right now?
Well, my focus has been in the last year. So for a while, I was working a lot with musicians and I participated in some organizations that were for developing programs of music for underprivileged children or kids that are in very troubled neighborhoods. And I still do that work every now and then. There's a lot of work that I do with children, on and off. But where I have focused the last year and a half has been with the water, helping indigenous people have water in their village. Mm-hmm. So there's some programs, organizations that I'll work with. And so the way that I've been able to work with it has been through fundraising. So creating events or concerts where we fundraise money for some of these villages to have assistance in building sustainable water tanks that give them clean water. So it makes it easier for them to have it because they actually struggle having this. So last year, I think it was 2019. This year has been, well, yes. There hasn't been any of that. It's been difficult. But in 2019, I did a fundraising event with some other colleagues, friends in California for the Huniquin tribe, where we raised money for them to have water tanks being built. So this is an ongoing project. It requires quite a bit of funding. So things like this that I'm involved in. And then, always still with the children. I did a walk this year. It was the walk for freedom. It was for bringing awareness to children who have been exploited or sex trafficked and some other very troublesome topics. So it was a walk, not a protest of any sort, but bringing awareness throughout the city of Miami. So I organized it with two other friends, and we ended up having quite a powerful walk through the downtown area of Miami with about 200 attendees, and things like this that I'm working with right now as far as like humanitarian charitable work is a lot of work with children and with water.
Thank you very much. You're doing great work. And thank you very much for participating in my show. Any final thoughts?
Just thank you. Thank you for the interest in my work and wanting to share it. I really appreciate it. This is actually the third interview I have in the last week. So I don't know where it's all coming from, but I'm grateful because I'm just a channel for the messages that we all already know and want to be reminded of. And if I can inspire any positive movement for the earth and the water and for people, then aho, and I'm glad for that, and I'm happy to know that people are still listening to my music and enjoying it after a year of having all my concerts canceled. As an artist, you start to wonder, like, oh, did I just lose my career? But it's been a time for a different type of work and conversation, so I'm grateful. So thank you, Claudiu, for inviting me, and also thank you for your work. I can't wait to read your writings, your books on the water, and look forward to meeting again soon.
Thank you very much. Yes, we might meet in Peru next year. Who knows? Mm-hmm. And for my viewers, thank you for watching. Please share it, give it a thumb up, and until next time, love and gratitude.